kind of interesting because I'm a comic book guy, collect comic books, loved comic books since I was tiny. And my original plan was to be a comic book creator, artist, writer. And I just kind of fell into role playing. A buddy of mine, Julius Rosenstein, and maybe we should.
I got you, Coach.
Thank you, guys. A friend of mine got me into role playing, which originally I thought was stupid. It just sounded stupid. I'm like, I'm not going to pretend to be some other thing, and I don't want to dress up and run around. He's like, no, you don't dress up. You know, the classic stupid questions that people always assume and ask. Well, you just kind of like dressed up and act this stuff out. And I'm like, well, hopefully you're dressed, but no, you don't have to dress up as a character. You don't have to go anywhere. You don't have to be an actor. So anyways, I tried it with an established game. This guy was cajoled into having like 4 of us join this game. And I used to think he was a jerk for many, many years. And I realized, oh gosh, he just wasn't used to running big groups. And so anyways, plus it was an established group. All the characters were like 3rd level. We were 1st level in D&D, right? So if an orc hits you hard, you're probably dead. And so all the other players were like, no, don't worry, little 1st level character, we'll take this guy. And it's like, but I want to hit something. I want to do something. I'm like, yeah, I was right, role playing sucks. And then the guy who kept saying, no, you'll love it, and this is perfect for you, Kevin. So you really owe Palladium Books to Julius Rosenstein, because he wouldn't take no for an answer. And finally he's like, why don't I run you and these other 4 people from work in a game? And I'm like, all right, but it's my last time. And I didn't even want to do that, except the other 3 players were like, well, if you don't play, Kevin, we're not going to play. And I'm like, what is this, grade school? Come on. And so we played. I had a fabulous time. My character died at the very end being stupid. I loved it. I'm like, this role-playing stuff is great. So I met a bunch of Julius's friends, which include Eric Wojcik, who was part of the Wayne Rare Gamers at Wayne State University, and I met some other folks. And Eric had this great idea for doing a gaming center. And I thought that was a fantastic idea. And so he and I, we found this place. It used to be an old methadone clinic. And it was 10,000 square feet for cheap. And yeah, it was in a bad part of town. For anyone who knows the Detroit area, it was in the Cass Corridor, which is famous for drug deals and prostitution. And so, yeah, we didn't get a lot of young people coming because you often had to pass a lady of the night going, hey, baby, you want a date? And it's like, no, thanks. And you go up to play games. But it was awesome. It was this huge 10,000 square foot area. And the really neat thing about the Detroit Gaming Center for me was I got to see all these different styles of gaming by different game masters. If a new book came out, or a new game came out, someone would inevitably bring it within the first week of its release, so you got to see new stuff all the time. It was awesome. And I started running my Defilers of Palladium Defiler campaign. And they actually was Palladium of Desires. The Defilers just kind of grew out of that. And again, long story short, my gaming group of 26 regular players, we would meet. Thankfully, we were all young and stupid, right? In our 20s or younger in college. And, we'd start gaming at 7 o'clock on Saturday night, and we'd stop Sunday morning, 8, 9 in the morning. But it was epic. And, people always are surprised when they hear 26 people. But it works pretty smoothly because what happens is they tend to form into cliques, into groups. So, and my mom was sick, and I used to come and visit her every day, and we'd watch her favorite 2 soap operas. And so I actually learned a lot from soap operas. So for you would-be game designers out there, look at everything, every kind of storytelling, and take what works. And so when you have running 26 guys, you got these 10 guys doing this, and these 2 guys doing that, and these, 12 doing this. And you just kind of set things up, and they're like, okay, we're at the door. Can I unlock? Is it unlocked? No, it's locked. Can I run in? Okay, I'm listening first. What do I hear? Well, you hear what sounds like, and you tell them, and they're like, oh. And I'm like, hold that thought. You guys over here, what are you doing? And then at some strategic point, I leave them. You guys over here, what are you doing? And it actually works really well because, and especially if they know, like they open up the door and like, holy shit, that's not a lion, that's a dragon. Right. Think about what you're gonna do. You over here. And it works beautifully because when you come back to them, they're like, I've got my spell, I'm turning invisible. I'm pulling out my scroll, I'm pulling out my flaming sword. I'm doing this, I'm doing that. I'm gonna turn invisible and sneak over here. And it gives them time to kind of prepare. And meanwhile, if the story is good, with everybody, compelling, interesting, you keep everyone's attention. It works out amazingly well. And that's when I worked out my combat system because I needed something that went really fast and felt intuitive. And, I developed my combat system versus D&D's. And I changed the armor rating because I'm not a math whiz and I always hated things like with D&D, it's like, okay, the low number for armor is good. It's like, no, shouldn't that be bad? And then you had to look at some chart or, okay, your opponent is this and your armor rating's that, so you really have this, and it's like, too much. I want something fast and quick. So I developed a bunch of that stuff, and at some point, my gaming group said, gee, Kev, this isn't D&D anymore. This is like some weird hybrid, and it's mostly yours, and it's awesome. You should sell this to somebody. Your game system, tighten it up and sell it to someone. So I did, and Eric Wojcik was my sounding board, which was cool because he was a genius and had really great ideas. And so I worked out my game system, and we had a couple big conventions in the Detroit area. So I went to Summerfest or WinterCon, one of those ran by the Detroit Metro Gamers, another big game club. And I hit up everybody who was there because all the big people were there. And no one was interested except for Judges Guild. And Judges Guild was doing mostly D&D source books and adventure books. So I went to them and I actually talked to Bob Bledsaw, the guy who ran the company. And he offered me $500 for the game system and a 2% royalty that would go down 1% if it was a smash hit and we sold more than 10,000 copies. And I'm like, Bob, shouldn't that go up? He's like, no, that's what it is, kid. And I'm like, I'll pass, Bob. I'm not gonna give it away. I've put a couple years into developing this already, and I'm not gonna do it. And he goes, but your art, kid, your art's amazing. Yeah, I want to hire you as an artist. So I did work for Judges Guild for people think for like 10 years because he reprinted my shit forever, but it was only like 6 months. But there's a lot of it because I had to. My mission was that he gave me was you have to produce 72 illustrations a month. Yeah, I'm rooming with Chris Arneson, the artist, and I told him that. He had this guy's eyebrows went, what? And Chris was like the same way. He's like, what? And I'm like, yeah, and plus I was paid like garbage wages. Like I had to do 10 or 12 pieces full page that had to be cover quality. And those I'd get paid $20 for. And then, or $25 for. And then the interior pages, I'd get like 20 for a full page, 10 for a half page, 5 for a quarter page. And they had to do so many. And after a while, I'm like, this is crazy. And the pay is horrible. By the way, I was the top paid guy. His previous top paid guy, Paul Jacois, who later became Janelle Jacois, we hit it off. He tracked me down, called me up, and we just hit it off. And so, I didn't think anything of him. Silencing my phone here before it goes off, R2. I didn't know anybody in the industry, so I thought it was really great that Paul/Janelle called me, and we hit it off. And of course, he asked what I'm getting paid, and I tell him, and he's like, "What? You're getting paid $1 more than I am?" And I'm like, "I'm sorry." And I'm like, "Paul, but I thought you were their top guy." He goes, "I am their top guy. I need to be getting paid more than you, even if it's a few bucks." And I'm like, "Yeah, and what about the art? You getting your art back?" He's like, "You get your artwork back?" Because it was back in the days where publishers felt like they should be able to keep the artwork. And I had cut a deal with Bob at Judges Guild to get 80% of my art back. They kept 20%, the pieces they really liked. And I think Paul was either they were keeping all of his art or 50% of it. So the next day I get a call from Bob Bledsoe going, "What are you doing talking to Paul? The artists shouldn't talk to each other." And I'm like, but why not? "Well, now he's demanding more money. You never tell him what you're getting." And I'm like, but he should be getting more money. We should all be getting more money. You're a $2 million freaking company. And so I only stayed with them for like 6 months. But the good news out of that is, like, for the first probably 10 or 15 years of Palladium Books, I would have people come up to me and go, "Oh, you're the good artist from Judges Guild." They knew my art from Judges Guild. And that had created a certain amount of recognition, which was cool, which I didn't expect. So that kind of paid off in the long run. And so anyways, I come back to my group and I'm like, "Nah, I can't find anyone to buy my game." And they're like, "Well, Kevin, you have some publishing experience and you've worked for a magazine. You should publish this yourself." And I'm like, "No." And so once they planted that damn seed, I couldn't get it out of my mind. And the problem is, I grew up poor in Detroit, so I didn't have the money to publish anything. And I knew exactly how I wanted the Palladium Fantasy book to be. And I was already drawing all the artwork for it, or most of the artwork for it, and tightening up my rules and everything. And I'm like, man, it's going to take me forever to raise the money to do this, because it would cost like $10 a book to publish it as a hardcover. And then even as a softcover. So I went to softcovers. Palladium Books actually introduced softcovers to the industry, because it was a new technology at the time to do 8.5 by 11 books as softcover, what they call perfect bound. And I did it out of necessity. It's that old saying of necessity is the mother of invention. And I'm like, I'm talking to my printer, or who would become my printer, and I'm like, "Oh yeah, that's just too expensive." Because everything back in those days, and we're talking early 80s, we're talking 81, everything was either in a box, pamphlets in a box, or a hardcover. And I'm like, a box is even more expensive. I'm like, I can't do this. And my printer goes, "Well, have you heard about perfect bound books?" And I did. I'm probably like most of you, I'm a book guy, right? So, yeah, and they pull out a copy. I'm like, "Oh yeah, the soft cover." I said, "But how does that hold up?" And I go, "Well, we can plastic laminate and all this." And I'm like, "What's the cost?" And it was like $1. And I'm like, $10, $1. I'm not great at math. I can put that together. And so now I have a plan. But even that, to do the typesetting and everything for this, we were talking like $8,000 or $10,000 to do like a 5,000 copy press run. And I'm like, I don't have that money. And Eric Wojcik said, well, Kev, you can't afford this, but what if you did something smaller? Do like a series, you're a comic book guy. Do a bunch of comic book size things. And I'm like, oh, wait, yeah, I can do those for like 32 cents a copy. Because my friend Alex Alex is one of our editors, had produced a comic book in college, black and white comic book, 5 issues called A+. So I had a printer lined up, I knew what I could do. So that led to the Mechanoid trilogy, which is a 3-part thing, a science fiction adventure thing that was fun, and I just kind of cooked up to get something going. And then, so I'm at a Gen Con, and I have my first issue of the Mechanoids, the blue and white little comic book thing. And my buddy, Matt Ballant, who's also exhibiting here, by the way, he's got his he did a little weapon compendium that was just line art, and it was just a little 8.5 by 11 folded in half thing, but it had like 700 weapons in it. And it told you to weight, and it was designed in such a way that it could be used for D&D or any game system. And for every one Mechanoid I'm selling, he's selling 4 of these little things. Now granted, his is $1.50 and sort of a pamphlet, and he was smart enough to go limited edition, limited to 1,000 or 12, whatever it was. And my book is $3.95. And that turned out to be a problem. So that's an interesting thing too, is every step of the way throughout Palladium's history, you learn stuff. So I'm like, look, this is a complete role-playing game. This is all you need to play. And people, every freaking person was like, so what's wrong with it? And I'm like, what do you mean, what's wrong with it? Why is it only $3.95 if it's a game, a complete game? And I'm like, because it only cost me 32 cents to make it. And so I learned price your stuff competitive with the market, because that's what people expect to pay. And so they assumed if it was only $4, it had to be a piece of crap. And especially back then, because everything, the price point was like, the cheap source book stuff was around $10. And I think D&D and a bunch of other stuff was around 20, 25. And, and I had precedents for that size because Traveler books were similar, but so I'm like, okay, figured that out. And then his stuff is selling like crazy. And the reason his little weapon book thing was selling so well is this was before the internet. So you'd say, okay, your character, D&D was pretty detailed. It'd be like, you have a halberd. And it's like, okay, what's a halberd? And you have a pole arm. It's a type of pole arm. What's a pole arm? And it's like, well, you have a claymore. A landmine? No, the sword. And it's like, what does that look like? Nobody knew what any of this shit looked like or how big it was. And so Matt's little pamphlet was brilliant because they had all this. It indicated what the blade side was, and if it was a 2-hand or a 1-handed weapon. And Matt loves research, he loves history. And so it was all this really cool stuff. And so I go to Matt and I said, Matt, let's turn this into something bigger. Let's expand it to a 48-page book, and we'll keep your stuff, we'll blow it up, which would be better because people can see it better. And he's like, expand it how, Kev? And I'm like, well, you did tons of research. How about armor? We make it weapons and armor. And he's like, yeah, I could do that. So we came out with weapons and armor. And the reason I spent time talking about it, he's got the compendium, that's cool. It was our first, there you go. Here, thank you, I appreciate it. So the weapon books originally were like this. They had like just 2 color, oh, he's got them all. What a guy. Where's weapons and castles? What's wrong with you?
I left that one at home.
So we come out with this baby, and that's exactly the original book. Is this our first printing? That'd be cool. I think it is. So he's got a first printing. This is exactly what it looked like. And, me and this other person that Matt knew, other artists, She did the pencils for most of it. I did the inks. And it's this great little book. And it was our first quiet mega hit. In 5 years, we sold 100,000 copies of this little book. And then we did Weapons and Castles, and that made money. And then we did Weapons and Assassins, and Exotic Weapons, and Weapons of the Orient, and Weapons, Armor, and Castle of the Orient. And yeah, they all sold really well. And I'm like, yes, and now we can do more. But I still couldn't afford to do this. And I was still running my Palladium Desire campaign. And one of my players, Tom Bartold, calls me up out of the blue and says, tell me why I should invest $10,000 into the Palladium role-playing game and not buy land in Alaska. So I'm like, okay, weird question, but a great question. And so I pitched him, and at the end of the call, he says, okay, I'll lend you $10,000. And for 20, he was getting 20% of the profits. And by the way, he figured out at one point that he got like 1,200% return on his investment. So, because this book did really well. In this book, I made it everything I really wanted to be. It was our first big book. This is what I wanted to do from the beginning. Like I said, I did Mechanoids and these just to keep the company going and to make some money and that kind of thing. And so we came out with this, and this sort of big battle then was I had company after company, I should say distributor after distributor, and other industry people telling me when I would explain what's in the book, they'd be like, it's too world unique. It's gotta be generic. And I'm like, but I don't want it to be generic. And they're like, no, it's gotta be generic. And so I watered it down, believe it or not. And well, I mean, the source books kind of tell you what the world is, and this does too, but so I did generic did as much as I could stand. So I made it a little more simple. And then, of course, it was soft cover, perfect bound. I have the expanded hardcover here, which is the original book plus the first source book. And because it has the original black and red, which people loved. And I couldn't afford to hire artists, so I did most of the art. And then we did the typesetting of a house and pasted it all up, paste ups. We actually pasted up boards where you put either glue or hot wax on the back of the typesetting pages, and you cut them out and you actually paste them down onto paper or a board, usually a grid board, and at least when we had money to afford it. And we didn't know better too. I'm like actually pasting original art onto big sheets of paper originally for like these. And it was crazy. But so we get this, we get it all done. It looks great. This will be no news to anyone who's bought Palladium products forever. I can't spell. So that's why in the original Mechanoid books, we averaged, this is not an exaggeration, I'm sad to say, we averaged 20 typos a page. And I did have a guy read and edit it, but apparently he couldn't spell either. He didn't know that mammal had 2 M's in it. So that was crazy. So my next big battle of this is, and this is not to slam the rest of the industry, but the industry's level of art quality back in the early days, the really early days, was really low. And part of it is everyone was like a mom and pop company trying to launch their ideas. And then because the standard of art quality was so low, our books really stood out because the art quality was really excellent. My art was very good, and I hired other people who did excellent art, and And so my battle was, I would send my books to distributors and they would kindly shrink wrap them for me. And I'm like, no, please don't shrink wrap them. I want people to be able to flip through this book and go, wow, this looks amazing. I get to fight these dragons. I get to face what? Oh man, look how cool my character would look. I wanted them to see this. Nope, don't worry, Kev. This will help them from getting damaged. And I'm like, my biggest distributor, Windmill Hobbies, back in the day, Joe Budricks, awesome human being, very cantankerous. Like when he first, like I couldn't get him to pick up any of our shit. And finally he calls up and orders a big order for us back then. It was like, I want 300 of these. And I'm like, holy shit, that's great. And yeah, let me get like 10 of that and 10 of these. And I'm like, that's fantastic. And I'm like, Joe, you'll be really happy with these. These will sell like crazy. Everyone's selling a ton of these. And he's like, no shit, kid. Why do you think I'm buying them? Yeah.
Question, so if that came before the core book, what were people using those with?
D&D, RuneQuest, anything.
How did they know it was for D&D?
Well, we were doing, at conventions, we would explain it to them. And then when we had enough money to start doing Dragon Magazine ads, it would say, for any role-playing system. And I think that's actually a great question because they figured it out. And I was gonna say, it's on the cover or back cover, but it isn't. But yeah, they sold like crazy and people, I think they just looked through them and at the store and they figured it out. And because it does explain in there someplace where you can use it for anything and how the rating system in the book works. So you could determine what damage was and that kind of thing, and so you could adapt it. So when this came out, like I said, Joe was always this kind of grouchy, cantankerous guy, but he had a heart of gold. He was one of those guys. And so when this book came out, we sent him, he bought like 25. And he's like, Kev, I want to get another 100, but I want you to send them to me on consignment. And I'm like, I don't do that, Joe. And he's like, but I believe in this book. I want to offer it to my stores on a consignment basis where they can return it. And I said, I just don't know if I can afford it. You know, we're still a little company. And he goes, tell you what, I'll just buy them. I'm going to do it anyways. What a nice guy. The same guy I had to fight, Joe, don't put plastic over my books. Which I think he still did off and on. But, you know, that was awesome. And then this took off. And then we did Heroes Unlimited, which surprised anyone who knew me. They thought that would be my first role-playing game. Because one, there wasn't a superhero game in 1980, 81, 82. And two, I'm a comic book guy. And I'm like, it's still percolating, man. The ideas are just, they're not ripe yet. You know, they're not ready. And so when I finally came out with Heroes Unlimited, I had a lot of people tell me, you're an idiot, because there's like 20 books now, no one's gonna find this game. And I'm like, well, I think a Steranko cover will help. At the time, Jim Steranko was probably the premier, or certainly one of the top 5 premier artists in the industry. And kind of a legend, especially in his own mind. And great guy. We became pretty close. But, and so I had a Steranko cover because I wanted it to stand out. And, you know, we're kind of off to the races. And I'm at I think it was at an Origins, not a Gen Con. Yeah, I think pretty sure it was Origins when Paul/Janelle Jacois shows up and says, Kev, I want you to be my art director. And I'm like, pardon me? And he's like, I'm at Coleco now, and we're doing video games, and you and I work great together. I want you to move to, I think it was Connecticut. I want you to move to Connecticut, and you know, your starting pay will be like 35 grand, which was good money in 1983. 84, I guess it had to be 84 if it's Heroes, 1984. And we'll give you it was $8,000 or $10,000 moving stipend, which you get whether you spend that actually all on moving or not. And I'm like stunned. I'm like, wow, Paul, I'm really honored and pleased. But what? And leave all this? And I have 6 products. And he just smiles and says, think about it. And I thought about it. But my mom was fighting cancer, and I had 2 little kids, and I'm like, no, I'll have to turn it down. And it turned out to be a good thing, because 2-3 years later, after the big Cabbage Patch craze and the ColecoVision craze, the company just sank. So I would have been unemployed and living in another state, and having to move again or do whatever. But it's just wild to think, wow, what would have happened if Palladium had gone under? Would I still continue to have done stuff? I mean, in some parallel universe, I'm a video game guy, and not role-playing. There would never have been Rifts or Turtles or Robotech. It's just kind of wild. And none of this would have happened without Julius Rosenstein, because he's the maniac who made sure I found the role-playing. So yeah, I loved it. But even then, I'm thinking, this is great. I love doing this stuff. This is all temporary until I break into comics. But I wasn't doing anything to break into comics. I'm focusing on all this stuff, and I realized in 1990, I'm talking to my attorney, and he's like, so how much do you guys gross a year? And I'm like, I don't know. Let me check. It's got to be $1 million. And we were a $2 million company, and I was working on a cash basis. He's like, are you insane? You need credit, and you need this, and you need that. And I'm like, oh yeah, that'd be good. I mean, again, I was just a kid gifted with the ability to tell stories, build worlds, and do decent artwork. From Detroit, I didn't know any of this. I never went to business school. I learned everything from the ground up. I mean, I was the guy shipping the books and packing the books and writing the books and drawing the books. And, I was everything. And then it's like, oh, I can bring in my buddy Alex, and I can bring in Matt as a freelancer, and I can do this, and I can do that. And, the more successful we got, the more people I started to bring in. So this did well. Heroes Unlimited did well. These were doing great. And then I said, I want to get into the comic book shops. I'm a comic book guy. I want to get into the comic book shops. And that would double or quadruple our sales and visibility. But how do I do it? And I started thinking, I need to find a comic book license that, would appeal to both gamers and comic book folks. And I heard about this hot new comic book called Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. But I couldn't find a damn copy. I didn't find out until recently that the first printing, of course, they're an independent, it's their first comic book. They produced it as a one-shot, because they're just goofing around, and at dinner they were like, hey, so what's hot these days? Oh, Teenage Mutants, the X-Men, because X-Men were on fire. And gosh, Daredevil, Miller's Daredevil is hot as heck. And what's that guy? It's got the hand, the ninja, the hand. That's why he came up with the foot. It was a parody of the hand. And for those of you familiar with the Turtles' origin is very similar to Matt Murdock, Daredevil's origin, where a truck with radioactive material is driving by and his canister bounces out. And this young man sees a blind man walking across the street and he's going to get hit by the car. So he leaps and pulls the man out of the way, but the canister hits him in the head. And he goes blind, but he wakes up with his radar and other abilities. Well, the boys, Kevin Pete, they cleverly said, okay, what happened to that canister? What kept bouncing? And it hit this kid who was standing at the walkway. It hit his little glass jar or bowl with 4 little turtles in it. It smashes, they fall down the manhole into the sewer, and so does the ooze. And it turns them into the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, along with Splinter, of course. And their sensei, Rat Sensei. And it sounds kind of stupid, but it's really clever, and it's really cool. And I had heard about it, couldn't find it. I finally got issue number 2. I read it, and I'm like, this is great. The storytelling's great. I love the art. And this would make a great role-playing game, I told my wife, provided they would let me create any type of animal into a mutant hero. And like 5 minutes later, the phone rings. It's someone I never heard of, some guy, freelancer, and he says, have you seen Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles? And I'm like, yeah, I just read number 2. I think it'd make a great source book for Heroes Unlimited. I'm like, no, it would make a great standalone game. It needs to be a standalone game. And we chit-chat about it, and he's like, well, I would like to try to write it. And from the very beginning, we had creative differences. Like, he thought it should be focused entirely on the turtles, no mutant animal creation. And I'm like, no, it's got to have, because I remember George Lucas saying, yeah, of course people love Wookiees, because they're just big walking dogs, and everyone loves dogs. And I'm like, everyone loves dogs. I love dogs. He's right. And so I'm like, this is perfect. We can take it and just really run with it and be awesome, because everyone has a favorite animal, if not a favorite pet. So he's like, well, can I take a run at writing this? And I said, well, first I got to track down Eastman and Laird. He goes, already have. Here's the number to Mirage Studio. And I'm like, great. And I said, well, yeah, if I get the license, I said, you can take a run at it, but you'd be writing it on spec, and we'd have to see, if it's any good. And he's like, yeah, I'm up for it. I'm like, great. So I call up Mirage Studios. I think I got Peter Laird, because originally I was always talking to Pete. And then later it seemed like I was always talking to Kev. And so I call him up, and again, remember, I am an aspiring artist, writer, creator, comic book artist, writer, creator in my mind. And so are they. So we talk about independent publishing and how do you guys do all that cross-hatching? That's got to be crazy, so much work. Like, no, we use this chemical board called Duo Shade. I'm like, what? And so they tell me how to buy Duo Shade, and I buy Duo Shade and experiment with it, and I'm like, this is great. And we just hit it off instantly, to the point where when it came to the contract, they're like, well, gee, Kev, we don't know anything about contracts, and it sounds like you kind of do, and you've been doing this longer than us. Yeah, like 3 years longer. And I'm like, what? And they're like, why don't you drop the contract? And I'm like, I can do that. So I wrote up this contract. Obviously, there's nothing odious in it, because we're still buds and doing things. And but that was kind of, you never do that these days. But so I draw it up, and I'm like, guys, I really want this to be recognizable. So can I hire you to do the artwork for the game? Because I thought it was really important. Like, I wanted people to walk into their comic book shop and see this this $10, $9.95 book, which wouldn't be crazy to buy, because graphic novels were starting to come out back then, and they were around $7.99, $10, $11. And I'm like, I want them to look at it and go, hey, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, that's that comic book, and open it up and see the art by the guys. And I'm like, so would you guys do a short comic strip, like 8 or 10 page comic strip for this? And again, they're like, they're just starting off, and they're like, yeah, sure. So we get this beautiful art. And I'm ready to get this stuff, and I get the manuscript, and it just was not what I wanted. It was nothing that I wanted. Now, fortunately, Eric and I were best friends, Eric Wojcik. And so when I first discovered turtles, I'm like, Eric, you got to read this book, this comic. You're going to love it. It's great. It's hardcore. It's kind of funny. It turned into a kid's show. It's like this hardcore, serious, cool thing. And it sounds ridiculous. I know, turtles, but it's awesome. And Eric reads it and he falls in love with it. And then when I tell him I got the license for it, and the things that I think need to be in the book. And I told this to the freelance writer too. I'm like, we got to have cool, quick, easy, intuitive character creation, animal powers and this and that. And he's like, yeah. And none of that was in his manuscript. And meanwhile, Eric and I were similar in that everything gives us ideas. So I tell Eric what I want in the book. And the next thing I know, he's got a character creation system for the animals. He's got the BioE system. He's got all this stuff. And I'm like, Eric, this stuff is fantastic. And I'll tell you right now, I will use this in a future book, but I got to see what this guy's manuscript is. I said, I gave him, first shot at it. And I'm kind of sorry I did now because this stuff's great. And Eric was funny. It always took him forever to write stuff. And one of the downsides for Eric is that he struggled with manic depression. And you would think when you're in a manic phase, that'd be good because you're this dynamo. And he was. The problem was all those great ideas, he loved them. And so it'd be like, I'm going to spend a week working on this fantastic idea. And then, what's this pretty toy? Oh, that's a really cool idea. I'm going to spend a month working on that. But none of it's finished. Oh, here's this other cool thing. Now I'm doing this, and now I'm doing that. Now I'm doing this. So he actually banged out the Ninja Turtle book, the original rules, in 4.5 weeks. But I think the reason he was able to do it is he was actually on vacation. When I get this manuscript, I'm like, Eric, I can't use it. I don't know what I'm going to do. If I have to jump in and do it, I got to put my current project or two on hold. And I really don't want to do that. But I've already got Dragon Magazine ads in saying it's coming out in time for Gen Con. I don't know what to do. And Eric's like, oh, Jeff, let me help. And so it was like, let me do this one part. Let me do the animal creation. Okay. And so he does that, and he's like, yeah. And we were talking like constantly, like every day, several times a day, as he was, spitballing ideas and hammering things out. And he knows we have this really short deadline, so he's busting his ass. But he's only doing this. I'm going to write the rest of it. And then it's like, yeah, Kev, I got all these ideas for animal powers. Let me write that section too. And I'm like, okay. Yeah, Kev, I got all these ideas for animal psionics. And I'm like, go for it. Kev, you need some adventures. And I have this cool idea for this bad guy, this genetic engineer called Dr. Farrell. And he could be the guy who creates a lot of the mutant animals. And I'm like, okay. I think his niece or nephew or somebody was into Care Bears, which drove him crazy. He hated the Care Bears. And he's like, yeah, Kev, I want to do the Terror Bears. It'll be a spoof. And I'm like, yeah, great. Do it. He ended up writing like 90% of the book. And that's how it got done in 4.5 weeks. And I already had the art, or most of the art. Eastman and Laird were fast as hell. They banged out the rest of it. Kevin Eastman calls me up at one point and says, Kev, can I paint the cover? And I'm like, I don't know, can you? And what would that cost me? And he says, yeah, let me try it. If you don't like it, you don't have to buy it. And I'm like, okay. He sends in the cover. I love it. It was fantastic. Everyone knows it. It's fantastic. And in fact, I bought the original from him for like a whopping $1,000 back in the day, and hung it on my wall for like 35 years before Joe Manganiello bought it. And yeah. Well, that's the Redux edition. It's a homage. It's a little slightly different, but yeah. And we get the book done. I print 10,000 copies, the most we had ever printed. It was scary because it, took a lot of our resources. And it's like, will it get into comic book stores? Well, it did, and that takes off. And we sell out the 10,000 copies in like 3 months. And we're like, fantastic. We print another 10,000 copies, that sells out in like 3 months. I print 20,000 copies. Meanwhile, I have this idea for Mega Damage. And it's funny, a lot of times the ideas come from ideas for a setting or a character or something that we want to do. And but other times it comes from like a particular thing. Like Riffs, the original concept for Riffs was the Glitter Boy was going to be the main hero. I was going to call it Boomers because of the boom gun. And then as I developed the concept more, he became more of like part of an ensemble cast. And the world and the Riffs took on a bigger role. And so I had Mega Damage, this idea for basically like walking tanks kind of stuff. And I didn't know what to use it for. And I had one of my sales guy at the time was a big anime guy. And so he tells me about Robotech. And I'm like, and this was stupid because it was airing at like 3 in the morning or 4 in the morning. And I'm like, I'm not gonna watch this shit at 4 in the morning. Could have just taped it on a VHS tape, but for some reason that never hit me. And I'm thinking, yeah, giant robots. I've seen some of this stuff, photons and stuff, and they're all right, but so then it goes to like 4 o'clock in the afternoon, and I'm there with my kids, and they come home from school, and they're watching the show, and I caught it sort of in the middle where the Zentradi attacked the Earth, and there's this great scene, and I'm just kind of half watching it. And this scene where there's this I don't know if he was National Guard or the Army, but there's this Army guy, and he's bending over talking to this little girl, and she's like handing him a flower, and he's like, "What's your name, little girl?" And it's like, whoosh, they're atomized. And I'm like, what is this? This isn't like goofy stuff. It was Robotech, and the guy who kept telling me for like 6 months, you need to watch this. I'm like, Rick, having a name Rick too. Rick, why didn't you tell me about this show? He's like, I've been telling you for 6 months every day, but you needed to tell me, Cal, you really need to watch this show. So we tracked down who had the license, which is Omni Gold. And that was crazy because I asked them if, I don't even give the licensing guy a chance to talk. I just pitch. And I'm like, so what do you think? And he's like, I think that might be one of the best pitches I ever heard. I'd love to give it to you. I'm like, yes, but I can't. I'm like, what? Because I've been negotiating with Steve Jackson Games for the last 3 months. I'm expecting to get a signed contract back this afternoon. And I'm like, oh. And I hung up the phone, and I'm kicking myself because my buddy Rick had been telling me about this for 6 months. And as fate would have it, and I told him, I said, if you should fall through, just give me a call and let's talk. And he's like, it's not gonna fall through. I mean, I'm expecting signatures this afternoon. I'm like, all right. Calls me back and said, you won't believe it, but it fell through. I'm like, yes! And that was our next big hit that got us into the comic book stores because Robotech became a comic, and anime was getting hot. A lot of comic book stores were doing it, and we were off to the races. And yeah, those are sort of the glory years, that in the 90s. The last half of the 80s and the 90s, we just, so Ninjas and Super Spies came out, and Beyond the Supernatural, and I had been working on, there you go, Ninjas and Super Spies. And, we just kept banging stuff out. Yeah, it's the original cover, Richard Corbin cover. There's a whole story behind that too, but that's in our videos. Yeah, I should mention, you can see me talk about the history of Palladium and the Palladium Books website, Palladium Books YouTube channel. And we kind of went through like every year and every major title, even not so major titles, and talked about their origin and what happened and that kind of thing. It's worth seeing. It's fun. A lot of people are really enjoying them. This gentleman told me earlier today that I'm really enjoying those. I'm like, cool. So we got those going. And then I had spent like 3 years working on developing riffs. I mean, not straight, but a lot. And then I was about to go into the final 6 months of actual final manufacturing and stuff. And Bubblegum Crisis came out, which is a great anime. And the villain are boomers. And I'm like, oh no. I didn't feel like I could do boomers as a role-playing game. I felt like it would be confusing. And I didn't know what to do, and I'm talking to Eric. Again, we're always bouncing ideas off each other, and I'm like, Eric, I don't know what to do with this. And he was already living in China, I think. And he's like, well, tell me about it. What's in this Rifts book? And I tell him what Rifts is all about, and I said, yeah, this comes out of a rift. You can rift it here, and rift this, and rift that, and rift the other thing. And he's like, yeah, call it Rift's World. And I'm like, I don't know. It's kind of like Green World to them, and I don't know. It's like, well, just call it Rifts. And I'm like, maybe. That was our working title. A year and a half later, I couldn't think of calling it anything other than Rifts. And Rifts was our super big hit. So, and again, now all of our stuff's going into comic book stores as well as game shops, and that would change with the whole exclusivity thing in comic books in the late 90s. But yeah.
By any chance, was Thunder the Barbarian an influence for you for riffs?
No.
I'm just
Yeah,
so surprised. They're like almost identical worlds.
Is it?
Yeah.
No, I never really followed it at all.
So, Die RPG, it's by Kieran Gillen and Stephanie Pons,
Mm-hmm.
did a beautiful 400-page book, and then went back and just published it a month ago as a comic book. And I literally bought it off a comic book shelf. It's literally the opposite. You were ahead, and then everything shifted to the big books. Do you think there's any possibility that comics could be a viable format in the future?
Yeah, I think so, absolutely.
Well, the thing that was cool about this is it was a full role-playing game in 50 pages. It was a little bigger than a,
Right.
But I looked at it and was like, holy cow, this could be huge.
Well, we've been kicking around some ideas along those lines too.
Interesting.
So, other questions, because I've been blithering on here. Yeah.
Can you talk about the issues between what happened with Nightspawn becoming Nightbane?
Sure. So
How did that happen?
So the funny thing is, Tom Orzechowski would go on to become a big name letterer for Marvel, and then later for Spawn. He did a bunch of the Image logos, did the Spawn logo, did the Spawn lettering. He did the Nightbane logo for me for my 1970 something fanzine called Nightspawn. And I always loved that name, and I thought, I'm going to save this for something special. I saved it too long, because Nightspawn came out, and McFarlane felt it was too similar. It caused confusion between Spawn, and so, there he's got original Nightspawn too. So,
I buy your stuff when it comes out. So.
apparently. So yeah, it's we were contacted by McFarlane's attorney and asked to change the name, and we negotiated that down, and we did. And actually, I kind of like Nightbane better. It makes more sense in the context of the world, because they're the bane of the night, and you're fighting the Night Lords and the Night Lands and all that kind of jazz. So But yeah, another quick question.
Yeah. Where did you get the term freebooter? I see that in the books all the time, and it's like, it's obviously a bandit, but like, where the hell did that come from?
The word what?
Freebooter.
Freebooter. I don't know, it's a word.
I was like, is that a Michigan thing?
No, I think it's kind of,
pirate term.
yeah, it's a history thing. I kind of was into pirates. So yeah, freebooters. I mean, the guy in the back.
How difficult, how was your experience with Harmony Gold, considering all of the controversies that they've had with various licensing?
Mostly really good. In the early days, it was kind of wild because when Carl Masick left, which was shortly after we got the license, the people there really didn't know shit about the show. And so one day I'm talking to the approval person and they're telling me, gosh, we read your stuff and mostly we look at the art and make sure the art looks right, but we just rubber stamp everything because you know it better than we do, and we're told you're really loyal to it. The fans love it, so. And so that was really cool. And I worked under a couple different generations of people. So I had different approval guys. Some guys weren't. We let the license go because they had a new approval guy and a new guy running things. And he wanted everything to be Robotech 3000, which you guys may be scratching your head, Robotech 3000. Yeah, it was so good it never came out. And the big deal breaker for me was we couldn't keep producing the original books because they just wanted to be Robotech 3000. And I said, see ya, because the fans are gonna hate that. So our experience has been mostly really good. They were under different regimes, the level of goodness varied. But as a licensor, I had a pretty good experience with them.
Thank you.
Guys, I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to talk some more in the hall or at my booth or wherever. But,
Thank you.
someone else probably needs this room. I saw some guys. Great questions.